Chris, thanks for joining us today for a quick update on Melbana Energy. Firstly, I understand you have been in Singapore this week attending the Asia Pacific Energy Assembly Conference. To start, can you just provide us with some of the key takeaways from the week?
Sure, yeah. It's a really excellent conference. Brings together investors, banks, upstream companies and regulators. And if I was to sum up the mood of the whole event, it would be a mixture of optimism around the sector and forward looking towards projects that can be funded. And so whilst the challenges around funding projects has not gone away, there was a feeling that governments and lenders, particularly Asia-focused banks actually, are softening their stance on not funding upstream projects as often. And so that stuck out for me actually, and it was a general feeling of optimism. And I think a lot of that's to do with the geopolitical landscape, Ukraine obviously and other areas where that's really focused the minds for people to consider the fact that it's not just always about sustainability. It has to be about affordability and also about security of supply for the energy. So there was a number of sessions that I attended, obviously, and I presented on a panel discussion, and I'll talk about that a bit later. But, you know, it was really a lot about the geopolitical aspects. Decommissioning was talked about a lot, carbon capture and storage and things like that. But a lot of it was about the energy trilemma and how businesses can access funds from traditional sources of funds, but also up and coming and unusual sources of funds. There was a lot of interesting topics actually.
Thanks, Chris. Now, just on the panel, you discussed the topic of bridging the financing gap. Who are the providers of long-term reliable capital for oil and gas, and how do you access it? Now, this appeals as a highly relevant and interesting subject matter, especially in the current climate. Are you able to provide some insights from the panel that might appeal to Melbana followers?
Yeah, it was one of those panels that if I wasn't on it, I would have just wanted to be part of it because it was a very interesting topic. So apart from Melbana, there was another upstream oil and gas company who actually turned out to win awards at the dinner last night for Upstream Company of the Year. So, you know, a good company, as it were, for us to attend it. But then there was also a credit finance company that looks at providing finance to large infrastructure projects in Asia, and another company that looks at providing private equity finance. And then finally, there was an oil trader there as well from Shell Trading. You know, that's the kind of broad spectrum of investment sources of capital that we could be considering, you know, companies like ourselves. And we talked a lot about going from the 200 million to the $1 billion company, and how do you do that? And how do you access that capital? And fundamentally, it boiled down to, you know, if you've got a good project and you're able to tell the story in a really clear and compelling way, then, you know, banks, with the caveats that I mentioned before, will consider it, but also oil traders and, you know, different ways of financing through credit and potentially some debt. But the one area that we talked quite a lot about was the rise of the family office. And what I mean by that is, you know, high net worth individuals, billionaires around the world who are taking positions in upstream projects or companies because they feel that the oil and gas industry has been oversold and move away from it towards sort of more green projects because the returns aren't there in the green projects. You know, we heard a lot about the fact that wind power, offshore wind in particular, is really not economic without long-term government subsidies. So therefore, these family offices, these high net worths, are looking to build intergenerational wealth to pass on to their kids and their grandkids and their great-grandkids. They take a very long-term view and they feel that oil and gas is here, at least for the next, well, who knows really, but, you know, they think they're beyond the current window that's considered for the sort of climate change ideas. So, you know, the family office was really talked about a fair bit, and I was quite surprised to learn that there's 4,500 of them around the world, and there's about $6 trillion of assets under management. So that's quite a large number, and Southeast Asia in particular and other parts of the world are, you know, growing in that space. So, you know, that was really excellent to meet some of these people. So it was a worthwhile panel to be on, and I learned a lot as well.
Thanks, Chris. And just finally, while I have you, I also understand you currently have an extensive field development plan in place for Amistad Unit 1B. Are you able to take us through your aspirations here, and why has the interest level been like from third parties towards this field development?
Well, this part of the world is very obviously parochial in the sense of it's very Southeast Asia focused. You know, there's a lot of projects here looking to provide energy to Singapore, for example, or looking at carbon capture and storage across borders. But people are genuinely interested in good projects. And so, you know, I was able to take people through what our aspirations are. And I summarised it very clearly. We are working very, very hard to get first oil production towards the end of this year and get oil in a boat and bring it to market. And talked about the aspirations for the upper sheet in Unit 1B, looking to drill multiple wells with as many rigs as we can, actually, to bring that on stream. And as you know, we've got a 2C contingent resource of 46 million barrels and a further 90 million barrels of prospective resource just in the upper sheet alone in the Unit 1B. I took them through where plans are and our aspirations are, and I also talked about the fact that we spent some time in Cuba recently, meeting with the regulator and meeting with all of the engineering firms that do all the work on the pipelines and the storage and the export solutions. And we've now got a really clear picture of what we need to do here. And I've said it many times to anyone that will listen, that the Cuban government is an extremely supportive government. And, I've been spent a lot of time in New Zealand and working in Australia, and I have to say there's a stark contrast about the support that we get from governments in Cuba. And, so I was able to talk people through what we're trying to achieve. And one of the areas we're looking to do is get oil on a ship, as I said, by the end of the year. And that's where companies like the oil trading community comes in, because without actually having an access to market, really it's difficult to sell oil to someone if you can't get a route to market. But there's a lot of interest in it because the Unit 1B oil is a high quality oil. It's lighter, it's lower sulfur than the standard oil that one normally finds in Cuba. So yeah, generally there's a lot of excitement, and that was reflected in the reception we had from the government, but also from our partner, Sonangol. So yeah, if I was to summarise it, there's a lot of people watching us to see what happens next.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate the update and all the best.
Thank you. Bye now.